In ancient Rome, 73 AD, a young gladiator named Marcus discovers he possesses an unusual ability. He can smell fear like a wolf scents prey. Captured as a boy from Germania and trained in the brutal ludus, he's become the arena's most feared warrior. When he's summoned to perform at a private villa for a wealthy senator's birthday, he encounters Livia, the senator's daughter, whose terror carries a different scent. Not of him, but of something far more sinister lurking within her own home. What begins as a story of predator and prey transforms into an unlikely alliance as Marcus uncovers a conspiracy that threatens not just Livia, but the very heart of Rome itself. The sand crunched beneath Marcus's sandals as he stood in the center of the arena, the midday sun casting his shadow like a dark specter across the blood-stained ground. 20,000 Romans roared above him, their collective voice a thunderous wave that would have drowned lesser men. But Marcus heard only the rapid heartbeat of the man standing 30 feet away, a condemned criminal given a sword and told he could earn his freedom if he survived. He wouldn't survive. Marcus closed his eyes and breathed deeply through his nose. There it was, that acrid, almost metallic scent that clung to terrified men like morning dew on grass. Fear had 1,000 different notes he'd learned over his 10 years in the arena. This particular vintage was sharp with desperation, tinged with the sour undertone of a man who'd already accepted death, but whose body hadn't yet received the message. "Begin," the editor's voice cut through the crowd's din. The condemned man charged with a wild scream, his sword raised high, a mistake that would cost him everything. Marcus sidestepped at the last moment, his gladius finding the soft spot between ribs with practiced precision. The man gasped, stumbled, and fell forward into the sand. The crowd erupted in approval. Marcus didn't acknowledge their cheers. He simply walked back to the gate of life, leaving the fallen man to be dragged out through the gate of death. Another day, another death, another step toward the freedom that would never come. Magnificent as always, my Germanic wolf, Dominus Quintus, stood waiting in the shadows of the tunnel, his toga pristine white against the grimy stone walls. The sinister who owned Marcus had grown fat on the profits of his gladiator's blood, and his oily smile made Marcus's stomach turn. "You've earned a special honor," Quintus continued, rubbing his hands together like a merchant about to close a lucrative deal. "Senator Aurelius has requested you for his villa tomorrow night. A private exhibition for his daughter's 18th birthday." Marcus's jaw clenched. Private exhibitions were worse than the arena. At least in the Colosseum there were rules, structure, dignity in the violence. In the villas of the wealthy, gladiators were reduced to performing monkeys, dancing for the amusement of drunk patricians. "I am a gladiator, not an entertainer," Marcus said, his accent still carrying traces of the Germanic forests where he'd been born 23 years ago. Quintus's smile turned sharp. "You are whatever I say you are. And tomorrow night you will be the main attraction at the Villa Aurelius. You'll fight 3 men, criminals, nothing challenging for someone of your talents." He paused, studying Marcus with calculating eyes. "The senator's daughter specifically requested you. Apparently she's heard tales of the gladiator who never shows fear, who can smell terror in his opponents." "Stories grow in the telling," Marcus muttered. "Perhaps, but true or not, those stories have made you valuable. Don't disappoint me, Marcus. Or need I remind you what happens to gladiators cease to be profitable?" Marcus didn't need reminding. He'd seen too many brothers in arms sold to the mines, or worse, when injury or age stole their ability to entertain. He nodded once curtly. The next evening came too quickly. Marcus sat in the cart that rumbled through Rome's narrow streets, his wrists bound in ceremonial chains that were more for show than security. 2 guards flanked him, their hands resting on sword hilts, though they knew as well as he did that if Marcus wanted to escape, decorative chains wouldn't stop him. The Villa Aurelius sprawled across one of Rome's 7 hills, like a small city unto itself. Marble columns rose into the purple dusk sky, and the sound of laughter and music drifted over the walls. Marcus was led through a side entrance, past kitchens where slaves scurried with platters of roasted peacock and honeyed wine, into a small preparation chamber. "You'll be called when they're ready," one guard said, locking the door behind him. Marcus sat on the single wooden bench and tried to prepare his mind for the humiliation ahead. He would fight, he would win, and he would endure their stares and whispers. It was no different from any other day, he told himself, even as his enhanced senses picked up the mingled scents of perfume, wine, and underneath it all, the ever-present undertone of human emotions, joy, lust, greed, and fear. But this fear was different. It wasn't the sharp spike of immediate terror or the slow burn of chronic anxiety. This was something deeper, older, like fear that had been marinating in someone's bones for years. And it was getting closer. The door opened, and a young woman stepped inside. She couldn't have been more than 18, with dark hair elaborately pinned and a stole of expensive purple silk. But it was her eyes that caught Marcus's attention. Deep brown, intelligent, and carrying shadows that belonged to someone 3 times her age. "You're Marcus," she said. It wasn't a question. He stood slowly, the chains clinking. "Domine, you shouldn't be here. I'm Livia. This is my father's house. I can go where I please." But even as she said it, her eyes darted to the door, and that strange, deep fear smell intensified. Marcus tilted his head, studying her. "You're afraid." Her laugh was bitter. "Everyone's afraid of something." "Not of me," he said, taking a step closer. The fear scent didn't spike as he approached. If anything, it seemed to ease slightly. "You're afraid of someone else. Someone in this house." Livia's face went pale, and she pressed herself against the door. "How could you possibly?" "I smell it on you," Marcus said simply. "Fear leaves a mark, like smoke in fabric. Yours has been building for a long time." For a moment, she stared at him. This gladiator, this slave, this killer, who could somehow see through the careful mask she wore. Then, to his surprise, her eyes filled with tears. "Can you smell death too?" she whispered. Before Marcus could answer, footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Livia straightened, wiping her eyes quickly. "They're coming for you. Fight well tonight, Gladiator, but be careful. This house," she paused, seeming to struggle with the words. "This house holds more dangers than the arena." She slipped out just as 2 guards entered to escort Marcus to his performance. But her words echoed in his mind, and that strange deep fear scent lingered in the air like a warning. The atrium had been transformed into a miniature arena. Torches cast dancing shadows on the walls, and 50 of Rome's elite reclined on cushions, already deep in their cups. Senator Aurelius sat on a raised platform, a man with sharp features and cold eyes that reminded Marcus of a vulture. Beside him sat Livia, her face now a perfect mask of dutiful daughter, though Marcus could still smell the fear rolling off her in waves. "Honored guests," Aurelius stood, his voice carrying easily through the "Tonight, for my daughter's birthday, I present the famous Marcus, the Germanic wolf, victor of 47 arena battles." The crowd applauded politely, though Marcus caught the whispers. Barbarian, savage, animal. He'd heard them all before. 3 men were pushed into the makeshift arena. Unlike the usual criminals, these men moved with purpose, their eyes alert. Marcus's instincts, honed by years of survival, immediately sensed something wrong. These weren't condemned criminals, they were trained fighters, possibly former soldiers. The senator raised his hand. "Begin." The 3 men moved in coordination, spreading out to flank him. Definitely soldiers. Marcus rolled his shoulders, feeling the familiar calm of battle settle over him. But as he prepared to engage, he caught something else in the air. A new scent, different from fear. It was anticipation, excitement, And it was coming from the senator himself. This wasn't just entertainment. This was an execution, and Marcus was meant to be the victim. The first attacker lunged, and Marcus let his body take over, muscle memory guiding his movements. He ducked under the sword swing, grabbed the man's wrist, and twisted until he heard the sharp crack of breaking bone. The sword fell, and Marcus caught it, spinning to parry the second attacker's thrust. The crowd gasped, some in horror, others in delight. But Marcus's attention was split. Even as he fought, he watched Livia. Her knuckles were white as she gripped the arm of her chair, and when her father leaned over to whisper something in her ear, the fear scent spiked so strongly that Marcus nearly missed blocking a strike aimed at his head. The third man was the most dangerous. Hanging back, waiting for an opening, Marcus feinted left, then dove right, rolling across the floor and coming up behind the second attacker. A quick strike to the back of the knee brought him down, and Marcus disabled him with a blow to the temple. Now it was one-on-one, and the remaining soldier was good, very good. They circled each other, testing, probing for weaknesses. The crowd had gone silent, sensing this was no ordinary exhibition. "You were meant to die tonight," the soldier said quietly, his voice pitched so only Marcus could hear. "The senator paid us well to make it look like an accident." "Why?" Marcus asked, not taking his eyes off the man's sword. "You really don't know?" The soldier laughed bitterly. "You poor fool. You were requested by name, but not for the reason you think." Before he could say more, he attacked with renewed fury. Marcus met him, strike for strike, their swords ringing in the enclosed space. But the soldier's words had distracted him, and he felt the bite of steel across his ribs. First blood. The crowd erupted in excitement, but Marcus saw Livia stand, her face stricken. Her father grabbed her wrist, forcing her back down, and in that moment, Marcus understood. This wasn't about him at all. This was about her, a demonstration of power, a reminder of what the senator could do to anyone who displeased him. With a roar that seemed to come from the deepest part of his Germanic soul, Marcus went on the offensive. He became the wolf of his homeland, swift and merciless. The soldier, skilled as he was, couldn't match the fury of a man who'd just understood he was a pawn in someone else's cruelty. The end came quickly. Marcus disarmed the soldier with a move that shouldn't have been possible, his sword spinning through the air to embed itself in a wooden column. The soldier fell to his knees expecting death, but Marcus stayed his hand. "I yield," the soldier gasped. "I yield." Marcus stood over him, breathing hard, blood seeping from the wound in his side. He looked directly at Senator Aurelius. "Is this the entertainment you wanted, Dominus?" The senator's face was a mask of cold fury. He'd expected Marcus to kill or be killed, not to show mercy. "Finish him," he commanded. "He yielded," Marcus said. "Even in the arena, a man who yields may be granted missio. This is not the arena. This is my house. You will do as I command." Marcus let the sword fall from his hand. "Then you'll have to find another executioner." The silence that followed was deafening. No one defied a senator in his own home. Slaves had been crucified for less. Aurelius stood slowly. "Guards, take this savage back to his cell. Quintus will hear of his disobedience." As the guards moved in, Marcus caught Livia's eye. She mouthed a single word: "Thank you." But as they led him away, Marcus knew his defiance had only made things worse. Whatever game the senator was playing, whatever danger lurked in this house, Marcus had just made himself a part of it. And somewhere in the villa's shadowed corridors, death was waiting. The cell beneath the Villa Aurelius was nothing like the barracks at the Ludus. It was older, darker, carved from the living rock of the hill itself. Marcus sat against the cold stone wall, pressing a torn piece of his tunic against the wound in his side. The bleeding had stopped, but the cut would need proper attention soon. He'd been here for hours, maybe long. No food, no water, just the steady drip of moisture somewhere in the darkness, and the scurrying of rats. but Marcus had endured worse. What troubled him more was the silence from above. No guards had come to drag him back to Quintus. No word of his punishment, just waiting. Then he smelled it again, that deep, marinated fear, getting closer. A key turned in the lock, and soft footsteps descended the stone steps. Livia appeared in the doorway, carrying an oil lamp that cast dancing shadows across her face. She'd changed from her party finery into a simple dark stola, and she carried a basket. "You shouldn't be here," Marcus said, not moving from his position against the wall. "That seems to be your favorite phrase." She set the lamp on the floor and knelt beside him, pulling items from the basket: clean cloth, a water skin, and a small clay pot. "Let me see the wound. Why do you care what happens to a gladiator?" She paused, her hands stilling over the supply. "Because you're the first person in this house who's ever stood up to him. And because," she hesitated, then seemed to make a decision, "because I need your help." Marcus studied her face in the lamplight. Up close he could see the fine lines of stress around her eyes, the way she kept glancing toward the stairs, as if expecting someone to appear. "Your father wants me dead," he said. "No," Livia said, beginning to clean his wound with practiced efficiency that surprised him. "My father wants you broken. There's a difference. Death is final. Broken men can be used." "Used for what?" She didn't answer immediately, focusing on applying some kind of salve from the clay pot. It stung, but Marcus had learned long ago not to show pain. "My father is not what he seems," she finally said. "To Rome, he's Senator Aurelius, champion of the people, defender of traditional values. But here, in this house..." She trailed off, and the fear scent intensified. "Tell me," Marcus said quietly. Livia tied off the bandage and sat back on her heels. "Have you ever heard of the cult of shadows?" Marcus shook his head. "They're old, older than Rome itself. They worship gods that were ancient when Jupiter was young. My father joined them 3 years ago, after my mother died." Her voice caught slightly. "At first I thought it was grief, that he was seeking comfort in faith, but then things began to change." "What kind of things?" "People started disappearing. Slaves at first, ones no one would miss. Then tisses who came to the villa and never left. And the rituals," she shuddered. "They hold them in the old chambers beneath the house, deeper than this cell. I've heard the screams." Marcus felt his warrior's instincts stirring. This was more than just a cruel senator's power games. "Why haven't you gone to the authorities?" Livia laughed bitterly. "With what proof? And who would believe me? Half the Senate attends my father's gatherings. They may not all be cult members, but they benefit from his influence. Besides," she looked away, "he's made it clear what would happen to me if I tried to leave or speak against him." "The fear," Marcus said, understanding. "You're not just afraid of him. You're afraid of what he might make you do." Her eyes snapped to his, wide with surprise. "How could you know that?" "Fear has layers like an onion. Yours has the sharp edge of immediate threat, but underneath, there's something else. Anticipation, dread, the fear of someone who knows something terrible is coming, but not when." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Tomorrow night, the new moon, they're planning something big. A ritual that requires," she swallowed hard, "a virgin of noble blood. My blood." Marcus sat forward, ignoring the pain in his side. "He means to sacrifice his own daughter, not sacrifice something worse." She wiped her eyes with shaking hands. "They believe that on the new moon, the barrier between worlds is thinnest. They plan to use me as a vessel, to let something through from the other side, something that will inhabit my body." "Possession," Marcus breathed. He'd heard tales of such things in Germania, dark spirits that wore human flesh like clothing. "My father believes it will grant him unlimited power. The thing they're summoning, it's old and hungry and has been waiting for centuries for a proper host." She grabbed his hands, her fingers cold and desperate. "I heard them talking. They chose you specifically because they needed a warrior's blood to mark the ritual circle. Your death in the exhibition was supposed to provide that blood, but when you survived and defied my father, he'll use me anyway, Marcus finished. Yes, tomorrow night, they'll take us both to the deep chambers. You'll be killed as part of the ritual, and I'll become something else. Something wearing my face, but not me. Marcus squeezed her hands, feeling the trembling in them. I won't let that happen. You're chained in a cell. What can you do? He stood, pulling her up with him, and for the first time she saw him not as a slave or a gladiator, but as the warrior he'd been before Rome captured him. I was taken from Germania when I was 13, but before that, my grandmother taught me the old ways. Your Roman cult isn't the only one that knows about the boundaries between worlds. Hope flickered in Livia's eyes. You know how to stop them, perhaps, but I'll need 3 things. First, we need to get these chains off. Second, I need you to tell me everything you know about the layout of those chambers. And third, he paused, you need to trust me completely. What I'm about to propose will seem like madness. I'm already trusting a gladiator I met yesterday with my life, Livia said with a weak smile. How much madder can it get? Marcus moved to the wall where moisture had been dripping, feeling along the stones until he found what he was looking for, a place where the mortar had weakened. In my homeland we had our own rituals for dealing with dark spirits, but they require the willing participation of the intended victim. You would have to be brave enough to walk into that chamber tomorrow night as if you're accepting your fate. You want me to let them begin the ritual? Yes, but with a difference. He pulled at one of the stones, working it loose. I'm going to teach you words in my language, words of binding and protection. When they begin their chant, you'll speak these words instead. It will corrupt their ritual from within. And you, I'll be there one way or another. The stone came free, revealing a small hollow behind it. Perfect for hiding something. But first, we need allies. Not everyone in this house can be loyal to your father's madness. Livia thought for a moment. The house slaves fear him, but the stable master, Titus, he's been kind to me since I was a child. And my handmaiden, Claudia, she knows something is wrong, but not the full truth. Good. Can you get them down here without arousing suspicion? Claudia, yes. She often brings food to prisoners. Titus will be harder, but I'll manage. Marcus turned to face her fully. There's one more thing. The ritual requires virgin blood, you said. But blood can be substituted with blood, if the exchange is made willingly. He held out his hand, showing an old scar across his palm. In Germania we seal pacts with blood. If we mix our blood before the ritual, you'll carry part of my essence. It might be enough to disrupt their plans. Livia stared at his hand, then at his face. You're asking me to perform a blood ritual, to prevent a blood ritual. Fighting darkness sometimes requires touching darkness, Marcus said. But the difference is choice. They would take your blood by force. This you give freely. She reached for the small knife at her belt, the one Roman ladies carried for cutting food. When? Now. Tomorrow will be too late. Without hesitation, she drew the blade across her palm, wincing at the pain. Marcus did the same with a sharp piece of stone. They pressed their palms together, and Marcus spoke words in his native tongue, words his grandmother had taught him, words of protection and binding that were old when Rome was young. As their blood mingled, Marcus felt something shift in the air. The lamp flame flickered, and for a moment he could have sworn he smelled pine forests and snow, the scent of his homeland. What did you say? Livia whispered. I bound us as battle companions. Where you go, I follow. Where I stand, you are protected. It's an old warrior's oath, but it has power, especially here, where the walls between worlds are already thin. Footsteps echoed from above, and Livia quickly pulled her hand away, wrapping it in Lot. I have to go. I'll send Claudia down within the hour with more supplies and to tend your wounds properly. And I'll speak with Titus. Livia, Marcus called as she reached the stairs. Whatever happens tomorrow night, remember, fear is just another enemy to be faced, and you're braver than you know. She gave him a sad smile. I hope you're right, Gladiator, for both our sakes. After she left, Marcus examined the hollow he'd found behind the stone. Tomorrow he would hide something there, something that might save them both. But first, he needed Claudia and Titus. Every battle was won or lost in the preparation, and this would be the most important battle of his life. As he settled back to wait, he thought about the strange path that had brought him here. From the forests of Germania to the sands of the arena, and now to a confrontation with forces that most Romans didn't even believe existed. But Marcus had advantages they didn't know about. His ability to smell fear was just the beginning. His grandmother had been what the Romans would call a witch, what his people called a seer. She had known he was special from birth, had trained him in the old ways before the Romans came. He'd suppressed those teachings for 10 years, focusing only on survival. But now, faced with genuine evil, he would need every skill, every piece of forgotten knowledge, every blessing his grandmother had whispered over him as a child. The sound of approaching footsteps interrupted his thoughts, but this time, the scent that preceded them wasn't fear. It was determination mixed with the herbs that healers used. Claudia appeared, an older woman with grey streaking her dark hair and intelligent eyes that took in everything. "The Dominus said you needed tending," she said, but her tone suggested she knew there was more to it than that. "Did she tell you anything else?" Marcus asked. Claudia set down her supplies and looked him directly in the eye. "She told me enough, and I've suspected more. I've been in this house for 20 years, since before the lady Livia was born. I've seen what the senator has become." She began unwrapping his bandage. "I've also seen what you did tonight, defying him in his own home. That took courage, or stupidity, perhaps both, but it gave the young Domina something she hasn't had in 3 years, hope." She examined his wound with practiced eyes. "This will need stitching. It will hurt. Pain is an old friend." As she worked, Claudia spoke quiet. "There are others in the household who remember what the senator was like before his wife died. Good servants who've been too afraid to act. But if someone were to lead, I'm a slave, a gladiator. Why would they follow me? Because you did what none of them could. You looked the senator in the eye and said no." She tied off the last stitch. "Titus is coming. He'll be here soon. But know this, Gladiator. Whatever you're planning, you'll have more help than you think." She gathered her supplies and left, but not before pressing something into his hand. "A small iron key. For your chains," she whispered. "When the time is right." Marcus looked at the key, then at the stairs where these brave women had risked everything to help him. Tomorrow night he would face whatever darkness the cult summoned. But he wouldn't face it alone. As if in response to his thoughts, a cold wind swept through the cell, carrying with it the scent of something ancient and hungry. The thing they meant to summon was already reaching through, testing the boundaries. Marcus gripped the key tighter and began to prepare. The battle for Livia's soul, and perhaps for Rome itself, would begin with the setting of tomorrow's sun. The story is building tension toward tomorrow night's confrontation, while developing the relationship between our protagonists and establishing a network of allies within the household. The character consistency remains intact, and we're setting up for major twists in the coming chapter. Titus arrived just before dawn, his heavy footsteps unmistakable on the stone stairs. The stable master was a bear of a man, with arms like tree trunks and a face weathered by years of sun and hard work. But his eyes, when they met Marcus's, held a gentleness that belied his rough appearance. "So you're the gladiator who's got the whole house whispering," he said, his voice a low rumble. "And apparently you're planning to do something foolish about tomorrow night." "You know about the ritual?" Marcus asked. "I know enough. I've been here since the senator was a young man, served his father before him. This family was once honorable." Titus sat on the floor, too large for the small cell's bench. "I've watched that sweet child grow up motherless and frightened, and I've been too much a coward to act. But when she came to me tonight, begging for help," he shook his head. "Sometimes an old man finds courage he didn't know he had. This won't be without risk, Marcus warned. If we fail, then we die. Titus finished. But some things are worse than death. Watching that girl be destroyed while I do nothing, that would haunt me into the afterlife. Marcus nodded, respecting the man's resolve. What can you tell me about the deep chambers? Titus's face darkened. They're old, older than the villa itself, built by whoever lived on this hill before the Romans came. The senator discovered them when he was expanding the wine cellars. There are 3 levels that I know of, each deeper than the last. The ritual chamber is at the bottom. Guards, usually 4 at the main entrance, more during gatherings, but there's another way. Titus leaned closer. The old aqueduct system. It was abandoned when the new one was built 50 years ago. There's an access tunnel in the stables that connects to the chambers. It's how I've been, paused, looking ashamed. How I've been getting some of the slaves out before they could be used in the rituals. Not all of them, not enough, but some. Marcus felt a surge of respect for the man. You've been saving who you could. A drop in the ocean of what I should have done. Titus pulled something from his tunic, a rough map drawn on leather. This shows the layout as best I know it. The ritual chamber is here, in the center. But Marcus, you need to understand, tomorrow night won't be just the household cult members. The senator has invited others from across Rome. There could be dozens of them. Then we'll need a distraction, Marcus said, studying the map. Something to draw some of them away. Leave that to me, Titus said with a grim smile. I've been stable master here for 30 years. I know things about this house that even the senator doesn't. There are ways to create chaos when needed. A new scent drifted down the stairs, lavender and fear, but also determination. Livia appeared, now dressed in the white robes of ritual preparation. The sight made Marcus's chest tighten. They've begun the purification ceremonies, she said, her voice steady despite the fierce scent rolling off her. I have to participate, or they'll know something is wrong. You're brave to go through with this, Titus said, standing and bowing slightly to her. I'm terrified, Livia admitted, but Marcus is right. The only way to stop this is from within. She turned to Marcus. Teach me the words. We don't have much time. For the next hour, as dawn light began to filter through the small window, Marcus taught Livia phrases in his grandmother's tongue. The language of the Germanic tribes was harsh and guttural compared to Latin's flowing syllables, but Livia was a quick study. Remember, Marcus said, the power isn't just in the words but in the intent behind them. You must speak them with absolute conviction, even as chaos erupts around you. What will happen when I do? Marcus hesitated. I don't know exactly. My grandmother spoke of turning dark magic back on itself, like reflecting sunlight with a mirror. But the consequences, he met her eyes. It could destroy them, or it could destroy us. There's no way to know. But if we do nothing, I become a vessel for something evil, and they use me to spread their darkness throughout Rome. Livia said firmly, I'll take the uncertainty over that certainty. Claudia appeared at the top of the stairs. Domina, your father is looking for you. The morning purification, I'm coming. Livia stood, but before leaving, she pressed something into Marcus's hand, a small glass vial filled with dark liquid. Poison, she whispered, from my mother's medicinal supplies. She taught me about herbs before she died. This is extracted from nightshade. Deadly in large doses, but in small amounts, it can mimic death. If you need to appear dead to get close to the chambers. Marcus took the vial, impressed by her foresight. You've thought this through. I've had 3 years to plan for this night. I just never had anyone brave enough to help me execute it. She touched his hand briefly, and he felt the tingling where their blood had mingled. Whatever happens tonight, Marcus, know that you've given me something I'd lost, the will to fight. After she left, Titus helped Marcus finalize their plan. The stable master would create a distraction using a fire in the hay stores. Dangerous, but controllable. Claudia would ensure certain loyal slaves were positioned to help when needed. And Marcus would use the chaos to reach the ritual chamber through the old aqueduct. The sun sets at the 7th hour, Titus said. The ritual begins at the 9th hour. When the moon is dark, you'll need to be in position before then. Marcus nodded, then asked something that had been bothering him. Why does the senator need this power? He's already wealthy, influential. What drives a man to such darkness? Titus was quiet for a moment. Love, twisted into something poisonous. When his wife died, something broke in him. He couldn't accept that sometimes death simply comes, that not everything can be controlled or conquered. He sought power over death itself, and that search led him to the cult. And they promised him what? Resurrection? Immortality. They told him that with enough power, he could bring her back and ensure they would never be separated again. Titus shook his head sadly. Grief can make monsters of men. Marcus, remember that when you face him tonight. He's evil now, yes, but he was once just a man who loved too much to let go. The day passed with agonizing slowness. Marcus dozed fitfully, conserving his strength while his mind ran through the plan again and again. Claudia brought him food and water, along with updates on the house's preparation. More guests were arriving, all wearing black robes over their regular clothing. The smell of incense and something else, something putrid and wrong, began to permeate even down to his cell. As the sun began to set, painting the sky the color of blood, Claudia came one last time. It's time, she said simply, using the key to unlock his chains. Titus is ready. The young domina has been taken to the preparation chamber. The senator and his guests are gathering. Marcus stood, flexing muscles stiff from confinement. He took the vial of nightshade, measuring out a careful dose. Not enough to kill, just enough to slow his heartbeat to almost nothing. When they come for my body, how long before the ritual? Perhaps an hour. They'll want to prepare your blood for the circle. Then that's when Titus creates his distraction. Yes, and Marcus. Claudia gripped his arm. Whatever you are, whatever power runs through your blood that lets you smell fear and speak the old tongues, use it all tonight. Don't hold back. Marcus drank the poison, feeling it burn down his throat. Already, his vision was beginning to blur. Tell Livia, tell her to be ready. When she hears the sound of wolves howling, that's when she speaks the words, wolf. But there are no wolves in Rome. Marcus smiled grimly as his legs gave out, the poison taking hold. There will be tonight. The last thing he heard before the darkness claimed him was Claudia calling for guards, screaming that the gladiator had killed himself rather than participate in their unholy ritual. Marcus drifted in a space between life and death, his consciousness floating while his body lay still. This was the dangerous part. If he'd miscalculated the dose, he wouldn't wake up. But his grandmother had taught him about the shadow realm, the place between worlds where spirits dwelt. As his body died a temporary death, his spirit could walk there. He found himself standing in a mirror version of the villa, but one made of shadows and whispers. The walls were transparent, like black glass, and he could see the cultists moving through the house, preparing for their ritual. But here in the shadow realm, he could see their true faces, the darkness that clung to their souls like tar, the hungry spirits that already fed on their corruption. And at the center of it all, in the deepest chamber, he saw the thing they were trying to summon. It was massive, a writhing mass of shadow and hunger that pressed against the barrier between worlds. Ancient beyond measure, it had been waiting for eons for a proper vessel, and tonight it would try to claim Livia. But it had made one mistake. It had let itself be seen. Marcus's spirit form snarled, and the sound echoed through the shadow realm like thunder. The thing turned toward him, and he felt its attention like ice in his veins. What are you? Its voice was the sound of dying star. I am Marcus of the Black Forest clan, he replied in his grandmother's tongue. Guardian of the old ways, marked by the spirits of my ancestors. And you will not have her. The thing laughed, a sound that would have driven lesser men mad. You are nothing, a slave, a gladiator, a broken toy of Rome. What can you do against me? This Marcus said, and began to speak words his grandmother had made him memorize, but never speak, words of summoning, not of demons, but of something else. The shadow realm trembled, and suddenly they were there. Wolves, dozens of them, but not ordinary wolves. These were the spirit wolves of Germania, the guardians of his homeland that existed between worlds. They circled the massive entity, their eyes glowing with silver fire. Impossible, the thing hissed. The Roman iron should have severed your connection to them. Roman iron bound my body, Marcus said, feeling his physical form beginning to stir as the poison wore off. But my spirit was always free, and tonight we hunt. He snapped back to consciousness just as rough hands grabbed his body. Two cultists were dragging him toward the ritual chamber, complaining about his weight. Dead gladiators heavier than he looks, one muttered. Marcus stayed limp, letting them drag him while he oriented himself. They were in the tunnels Titus had described, heading deeper into the earth. The smell of fear was overwhelming now, not just Livia's, but others. He could hear chanting ahead, rhythmic and wrong, words in a language that predated human speech. They dragged him into a vast, circular chamber, lit by hundreds of black candles. The floor was marked with symbols that hurt to look at, and at the center, on a raised altar, lay Livia. She was conscious but bound, her white robes making her look like a sacrifice from ancient times, which, Marcus supposed, she was. Senator Aurelius stood at the head of the altar, wearing robes of deep purple, a crown of iron thorns on his head. Around him, in concentric circles, stood dozens of cultists, all chanting in unison. "Place the gladiator's body at the third cardinal point," Aurelius commanded. "His blood will complete the circle." They dropped Marcus roughly, and he let his head loll to the side, able to see Livia. Her eyes found his, and he saw recognition there. She knew he was alive. One cultist approached with a ceremonial dagger, ready to spill his blood. That's when Marcus heard it. The sound of panicked shouts from above. Titus's distraction had begun. Fire in the stables. Someone burst into the chamber. It's spreading to the main house. Several cultists looked to Aurelius uncertain. "Ignore it," he commanded. "Nothing must interrupt the ritual. Continue the chanting." But the seed of chaos had been planted. The perfect unity of their voices wavered, and Marcus felt the shift in the air. The barrier between worlds was weakening, but not in the controlled way they'd planned. The cultist with the dagger knelt beside Marcus, raising the blade. That's when Marcus struck. His hand shot up, grabbing the man's wrist and twisting until the dagger fell into his own hand. In one fluid motion he rolled to his feet and threw the dagger, where it embedded itself in the rope binding. Livia's right hand. "Now," Marcus roared, and his voice carried the howl of wolves. The sound that erupted from his throat wasn't entirely human. It was the hunting call of his clan, and in the shadow realm, his spirit wolves answered. They poured through the weakened barrier, invisible to most, but terrifyingly real to those touched by dark magic. Livia, her hand free, pulled the dagger out and cut her other bonds. As cultists rushed toward her, she stood on the altar and began to speak the words Marcus had taught her, her voice clear and strong despite her fear. "By earth and storm, by wolf and tree, I deny you passage through me." The effect was immediate. The carefully drawn symbols on the floor began to crack and bleed actual blood. The candles flared, their black flames turning silver white, and the thing trying to push through from the other side screamed in rage. Aurelius's face contorted with fury. "You dare defile our sacred ritual. Guards, kill them both." But his guards were busy with problems of their own. The spirit wolves were among them now, and while they couldn't physically touch those untainted by dark magic, the cultists could feel their teeth. Pandemonium erupted as robed figures fled, screaming about invisible beasts. Marcus fought his way toward the altar, using the chaos to his advantage. A cultist tried to stop him, and Marcus grabbed him, smelling the corruption on his soul. "You chose this darkness," he growled, before throwing the man into a group of his fellows. He reached Livia just as her father advanced on her, a wickedly curved blade in his hand. "You stupid girl," Aurelius snarled. "Do you know what you've done? Without a proper vessel, it will consume everything." He was right. Marcus could feel it. The thing was coming through anyway, but without a host to contain it, it would be raw destruction. The chamber shook, stones falling from the ceiling. "Then we give it a vessel," Marcus said, stepping between Aurelius and Livia. "Just not the one you planned." Understanding dawned in the senator's eyes. No, but Marcus was already moving. He grabbed Aurelius and spoke in his grandmother's tongue, words of binding and transfer. The blood oath he'd shared with Livia flared to life, creating a connection, a bridge, and across that bridge, he pushed the thing that was trying to enter their world, not into Livia but into the man who'd invited it. Aurelius screamed as the entity poured into him, his body convulsing. But this wasn't the gentle possession he'd planned, where the host's consciousness would remain. This was violent, wrong, a forcing of something vast into a vessel never meant to contain it. "You wanted power over death," Marcus said coldly. "Now you have it. You are death." The senator's body began to change, darkness spreading under his skin like poison. His eyes turned black, then began to weep shadow. He reached out toward Livia, his mouth opening to speak, but only screams emerged, his own and the entity's, mingled in agony. "Father," Livia whispered, and despite everything there was pity in her voice. For a moment, Aurelius's eyes cleared. The real him, what was left, looked at his daughter. "Forgive me," he managed to say, before the entity consumed him entirely. The thing that had been Senator Aurelius collapsed, its body breaking apart into shadow and ash. The entity, finding the vessel unsuitable, tried to escape back to its realm, but the ritual circle, broken as it was, became a trap. It was caught between worlds, unable to go forward or back, and with a sound like the world ending, it simply ceased. The silence that followed was deafening. The ritual chamber was in ruins. Stones had fallen from the ceiling, crushing several of the unholy symbols on the floor. Black candles lay scattered and extinguished, their wax pooling like dark blood. And where Senator Aurelius had stood, only a pile of ash remained, still smoking with otherworldly heat. Livia stood frozen on the altar, staring at what was left of her father. Marcus could smell the storm of emotions rolling off her. Relief, grief, guilt, and underneath it all, a terrible freedom. "Domina," Claudia's voice broke the silence. She entered the chamber with Titus and several loyal slaves, all carrying torches. "The fire is under control, but the city guards are coming. We need to leave." But Livia didn't move. She slowly descended from the altar and walked to the pile of ash, kneeling beside it. With trembling fingers, she reached out, but stopped, just short of touching the remains. "He wasn't always evil," she whispered. "When I was young, he would carry me on his shoulders through the garden. He taught me to read, to think, to question." Mother's death broke something in him that could never be mended. Marcus approached carefully, aware that grief could be as dangerous as any enemy. "He made his choice, Livia. You gave him the chance to stop, and he chose power over you." "I know." She stood, and when she turned to face them, her expression had hardened into something regal. "But knowing doesn't make it easier." She looked around at the cultists who hadn't fled, some unconscious, others cowering in corners. "What do we do with them?" "The city guards will handle them," Titus said. "I've already sent word to Magistrate Corvus. He's been suspicious of your father's activities for months, but had no proof. This," he gestured to the chamber, "this is all the proof he needs." "And what about me?" Livia asked. "I'm the daughter of a traitor, a cultist. Roman law states that you're a victim," a new voice interrupted. Magistrate Corvus himself entered the chamber, flanked by a dozen guards. He was an older man with sharp eyes that missed nothing. His gaze swept the room, taking in the destroyed ritual circle, the unconscious cultists, and finally settling on Marcus and Livia. "Interesting," he said. a gladiator and a senator's daughter, standing together in the ruins of dark magic. "There's a story here, my lord," Livia began, but Corvus raised a hand. "I've been watching this house for 2 years. Young lady, I know you've been as much a prisoner as any slave. And you," he turned to Marcus, "you're the Germanic gladiator who defied the senator last night. Your owner, Quintus, has already been arrested. We found evidence that he was supplying victims for these rituals." Marcus felt no surprise. He'd suspected Quintus was involved. "The question now," Corvus continued, "is what to do with you both. Technically, gladiator, you're property of a criminal, which makes you property of Rome, and Lady Livia, your father's estates will be confiscated, leaving you with nothing." "I expected as much," Livia said with quiet dignity. Corvus studied them both for a long moment. "However, Rome owes you a debt. You've exposed and destroyed a corruption that reached into the Senate itself. Already, 3 other senators have fled the city rather than face questioning." He paused. "I'm prepared to offer you both a choice." "What kind of choice?" Marcus asked, suspicious. "For you, gladiator, freedom, full manumission, Roman citizenship, and a purse of gold sufficient to start a new life. You could return to Germania if you wish, or remain in Rome as a free man." Marcus's heart raced. Freedom. After 10 years, freedom was being offered to him, but he looked at Livia, standing alone amidst the ruins of her life, and knew his choice was already made. "And for Lady Livia?" he asked. "For her, a choice between 2 paths. She can accept exile with a small stipend, enough to live modestly in one of the outer provinces." Corvus smiled slightly. "She can enter the service of Rome itself. We have need of those who understand darkness, who can recognize it when it appears. The Emperor has authorized me to create a new position, investigator of supernatural threats. It would mean giving up the noble life, working in shadows, but it would be honorable work." Livia's eyes widened. "You want me to hunt cultists? Who better than someone who's seen their evil firsthand? You would have resources, authority." He glanced at Marcus. "You could choose your own assistants." The weight of the moment hung heavy in the air. Marcus could feel the pull of home, of the forests he'd been taken from. But stronger than that was the pull of the blood oath, the connection forged in crisis. And beyond even that, something deeper, a recognition that their fight wasn't over. The cult of shadows was larger than just this house. Evil like this had roots that spread wide. "I need time to consider," Livia said. "Of course, you have until dawn. Guards will escort you both to safe quarters for the night." Corvus turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and gladiator, your unique abilities haven't gone unnoticed. That sense of smell, the way you fought things that weren't quite there. Rome could use such talents, should you choose to stay." After he left, Claudia approached Livia. "My lady, I've prepared your mother's old chambers. They weren't touched by the corruption." Livia nodded numbly, then looked at Marcus. Would you walk with me? I don't want to be alone just yet." They made their way through the villa, past scorch marks from the fire, past rooms where guards were cataloguing evidence of the cult's activities. The house felt different now, lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted from its stone. Livia's mother's chambers were on the 2nd floor, overlooking a small garden. They'd been kept clean but untouched, like a shrine. Livia ran her fingers over a hairbrush on the vanity, her mother's red hair still caught in its bristles. "She would have hated what he became," she said softly, "but she also would have understood it. She loved him that much." Marcus stood awkwardly near the door, unsure of his place here. In the arena, everything was simple. Fight, survive, fight again. This, whatever this was between them, was complicated in ways he didn't understand. "You're going to accept Corvus's offer," he said. It wasn't a question. "How do you know?" "The same way I knew you were afraid that first night. I can smell determination on you now. Purpose. You've spent 3 years being helpless. Now you have a chance to ensure no one else suffers what you did. She turned to face him. And you, will you take your freedom and leave? Marcus was quiet for a moment, then walked to the window, looking out at the garden below. For 10 years I've dreamed of the forests, the snow, the freedom to walk where I choose. But, he turned back to her. I've learned something. Home isn't just a place. It's a purpose. And I think my purpose might be here. Hunting cultists with a senator's daughter, Livia asked with a weak smile. Protecting someone worth protecting, Marcus corrected, using my abilities for something more than entertainment. Your mother was Roman, but she loved your father. My grandmother was Germanic, and she taught me that good and evil exist in all peoples. Maybe it's time to stop seeing ourselves as Roman or Germanic, and start seeing ourselves as human. Livia crossed the room to stand before him. This close, he could see the gold flecks in her brown eyes, the strength she'd hidden for so long behind fear. The blood oath, she said. Is it permanent? It can be broken if both parties wish it, and if they don't. Marcus reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and touched the hand they'd cut for the ritual. Then it remains, a connection, a promise of protection. I don't want it broken, she said firmly. Whatever comes next, I want to face it with someone I trust. And after what we've been through, you're the only person I trust completely. A knock at the door interrupted them. Titus entered, his face grave. Forgive the intrusion, but there's something you both need to see. They followed him down to what had been the senator's study. The room had been ransacked by guards looking for evidence, but Titus led them to a hidden panel behind a bookshelf. I found this while helping the guards, he said, pulling out a leather-bound book. It's your father's journal, my lady. His real thoughts, not the lies he told everyone else. Livia took it with trembling hands and opened it to a random page. Her father's neat handwriting filled the page, and she began to read aloud, Year 3 since Maria's death. The voices grow stronger. They promise me she can return. That debt is not final. But the price. Each ritual takes more of my soul. I see the fear in Livia's eyes and hate myself for causing it. But if I can bring her mother back, she'll understand. She'll forgive me. They both will. She flipped forward several pages. The entity has shown me the truth. Maria cannot return. Not truly. It lied, as demons do. But now I'm too deep. If I stop, it will take Livia instead. So I continue the charade, pretending to be willing, while searching for a way to destroy it. I've become the monster to fight the monster. May the gods forgive me. Tears streamed down Livia's face as she read. Marcus took the journal gently from her shaking hands and read the final entry, dated just 2 days ago. Tomorrow's exhibition will bring the Gladiator. I've heard of his abilities, his connection to the old ways. I pray he's strong enough to stop what I've set in motion. I cannot fight the entity's control much longer. If you find this, Livia, know that everything I did was to protect you, even the evil. I chose to become damned so you could remain pure. Your mother would be proud of the woman you've become. I am proud, though I have no right to be. Be stronger than I was. Choose love over power, always. The room was silent, except for Livia's quiet sobs. Marcus set the journal down and awkwardly put an arm around her shoulders. She turned into him, crying against his chest, and he held her as she grieved for the father she'd lost long before tonight, the man who'd loved her enough to damn himself, but not enough to trust her with the truth. He was fighting it, she whispered. All this time, he was trying to protect me. He was. Marcus agreed, but he was also wrong. He should have trusted you, should have fought alongside you, instead of against you. Love doesn't mean making someone's choices for them. She pulled back, wiping her eyes. Was that your Germanic wisdom? No, Marcus said. That's what I learned from you. You could have run, could have hidden, could have let fear control you. Instead, you chose to fight. Your father underestimated you. I won't make that mistake." Before either could say more, Claudia appeared. "Dawn approaches. Magistrate Corvus has returned for your answers." They found Corvus in the atrium, watching the sunrise through the hole in the roof where stones had fallen during the ritual's destruction. "Have you decided?" he asked, without preamble. "I accept your offer," Livia said, her voice steady. "I'll become your investigator of supernatural threats." "And you, Gladiator?" Marcus looked at Livia, then back at Corvus. "I accept freedom and citizenship, but I also offer my services to your new investigator. My abilities, such as they are at her disposal." Corvus smiled. "I hoped you'd say that. The Senate has approved a generous budget for this new endeavor. You'll have a house in the city, access to the imperial libraries, and the authority to investigate anywhere in the empire where darkness takes root." "There's one more thing," Livia said. "The household slaves here, they were victims too. I want them freed, with compensation for their years of service. That can be arranged. The senator's estate is substantial, even after confiscation." Corvus produced 2 scrolls. "Your citizenship papers, Marcus, and your official appointment, Lady Livia. Or should I say, Investigator Livia." As Marcus took his citizenship papers, the weight of 10 years seemed to lift from his shoulders. He was free, truly, finally free. But freedom, he realized, wasn't about being unchained. It was about choosing your own chains. And he chose the connection forged in blood and battle with the remarkable woman beside him. "Where do we start?" Livia asked. "There are reports from Pompeii, Corvus, strange disappearances, rumors of dark rituals near the volcano. It could be nothing, or it could be another cell of the cult." Livia finished. "We'll leave tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Not even a day to rest." "Evil doesn't rest," Livia said, but then softened. "But you're right, we should take today, to honor the dead, to prepare for what's ahead." Corvus left them with promises of resources and support. As the morning sun filled the atrium, Livia and Marcus stood among the ruins of her old life, planning their new one. "I want to hold a proper funeral for my father," she said. "Not the senator he became, but the man he was. Will you help me?" "Of course." They spent the day preparing. Titus and Claudia helped gather what remained of Aurelius's personal effects, not the cult items, but the human touches. A portrait of him, with his wife, letters he'd written to Livia when she was a child, the wooden sword he'd used to teach her to defend herself. As sunset approached, they built a pyre in the garden, where Aurelius had once played with his daughter. The household gathered, slaves now freed, guards who'd served the family honorably, even some neighbors who remembered the senator before his fall. Livia stood before the pyre, holding a torch. "My father was 2 men, she said, her voice carrying across the gathering. "One was consumed by grief and corrupted by power. That man died in the chambers below, and Rome is better for it. But the other man, the one who loved my mother, who raised me with kindness and wisdom, who fought against darkness, even as it consumed them, that man deserves to be remembered." She touched the torch to the pyre, and flames leapt up, consuming the remnants of Senator Aurelius's human life. As the smoke rose into the darkening sky, Marcus began to sing, an old Germanic funeral song his grandmother had taught him. His voice, rough from years of battle cries, carried the melody with surprising gentleness. Others joined in with their own traditions. Claudia sang a Roman hymn, Titus recited an old soldier's prayer, and one by one, the gathered crowd added their voices to the farewell. As the fire burned down to embers, Livia took Marcus's hand. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" "For seeing me as more than a frightened girl, for believing I could be strong, for staying when you could have left." Marcus squeezed her hand. "You saved yourself, Livia. I just made sure you didn't have to do it alone." 3 months had passed since the destruction of the Cult of Shadows in Rome. The house that Marcus and Livia shared was modest by noble standards, but palatial compared to anything Marcus had known. Stated near the Forum, it served as both their home and the headquarters of their investigation unit. Marcus stood in the courtyard, practicing sword forms in the early morning light. His movements were different now, less brutal, more precise. He was no longer fighting for the crowd's amusement, but honing skills he might need to protect innocent lives. "You're up early," Livia said from the doorway. She was dressed in practical traveling clothes, rather than the elaborate stole of a noble woman. The change suited old habits. Marcus replied, completing his final form, "And I smelled trouble coming." "Your nose or intuition?" "Both." He sheathed his sword. "The messenger from Pompeii. He arrived an hour ago. 3 more disappearances, all young women of noble birth. The local magistrate is terrified." "It's another cult," Marcus frowned. They'd investigated 4 cases in the past 3 months. 2 had been frauds, criminals using fear of the supernatural to cover ordinary crimes. 1 had been a genuine haunting that had required all of Marcus's Germanic knowledge to resolve. The fourth had been real, a splinter cell of the cult of shadows operating out of the abandoned temple. They'd stopped the ritual, but Marcus still bore the scars from that encounter. "We should leave immediately," he said. "I've already arranged transport." "But Marcus," Livia hesitated. "There's something else." The messenger mentioned that one of the missing girls left behind a journal. She wrote about dreams, about something calling to her from the mountain. "Vesuvius," Marcus, a chill running down his spine. His grandmother had spoken of mountains as places of power, where the barriers between worlds were naturally thin. "We'll need to be careful," Livia said. "If they're using the mountain's power to amplify their rituals, then we're walking into something far more dangerous than what we faced in Rome." Marcus met her eyes. "We could request backup from the Legion." "We could," Livia agreed. "But by the time they mobilize, those girls could be dead. Or worse." It was a familiar argument. In their short time as investigators, they'd learned that official channels moved slowly while evil moved fast. More than once they'd had to act on their own authority and deal with the consequences later. "Pack light," Marcus said, "and bring the special equipment." The special equipment was their collection of items designed to combat supernatural threats. Silver blades, blessed salt from the temples of Vesta, iron chains inscribed with protective runes that Marcus remembered from his childhood. It was an odd mixture of Roman and Germanic traditions, but they'd learned that evil was universal, and sometimes it took combined traditions to fight it. As they prepared to leave, Claudia approached. The older woman had chosen to stay with them as their housekeeper, but she was much more than that. She was their researcher, their connection to Rome's underground network of information. "I've had word from my contacts in Pompeii," she said. "The disappearances started after a new priest arrived at the local temple. A man named Cassius, who claims to have studied mysteries in the East." "Description?" Livia asked. "Tall, thin, burns on his neck that he hides with high collars." And Claudia hesitated. "He has completely black eyes. Not dark brown, black." Marcus and Livia exchanged glances. They'd encountered someone with similar eyes in the 4th case, a cultist who'd allowed a minor demon to partially possess him in exchange for power. "He's one of them," Marcus said grimly. "It would seem so. Be careful, both of you. If he's operating openly as a priest, he either has powerful protection or he's very confident in his abilities." They left Rome as the sun reached its zenith, riding hard toward Pompeii. The journey would normally take 3 days, but they pushed their horses, camping only when exhaustion forced them to stop. On the 2nd night, as they sat by their small fire, Livia asked a question that had been hovering between them for months. "Do you ever regret staying? You could be home in Germania by now, free of all this darkness." Marcus added a stick to the fire, watching the sparks rise into the night sky. "My grandmother once told me that we don't choose our fate, but we choose how we meet it." "I could have gone home, yes. But what would I have found? 10 years have passed. My clan might be dead or scattered, and I would have spent the rest of my life knowing I'd left you to fight alone. You don't owe me anything, Marcus." The blood oath was about stopping the ritual, nothing more. He looked at her across the fire, seeing the strength she'd found in these past months, but also the loneliness. Being an investigator meant being apart from normal society, living in the shadows between the ordinary world and the darkness that threatened it. In Germania, he said slowly, we have a word, Gefährte. It means companion, but more than that, it means someone who shares your dangers, your path, your purpose. You are my Gefährte, Livia, not because of any oath, but because I choose it. She was quiet for a moment, then smiled. A real smile, not the polite mask she wore in public. The Romans have a similar concept. Socius, partner, ally, friend. You are my Socius, Marcus. They reached Pompeii the next afternoon. The city sprawled in the shadow of Vesuvius, the mountain looming like a sleeping giant. Marcus could smell the sulfur from the volcanic vents, but underneath that, something else, that familiar scent of fear, mixed with dark magic. The local magistrate, a nervous man named Flavius, met them at the city gates. Thank the gods you've come. Another girl disappeared last night, taken from her bed despite guards at every door. Show us where, Livia commanded, and Flavius hurried to comply. The house was wealthy, with elaborate frescoes and a fountain in the atrium, but Marcus could smell the wrongness immediately. It was like the scent at the villa in Rome, but different, older, more primal. The girl's room, he said. Take us there. The chamber was undisturbed, except for an open window. Marcus approached it, inhaling deeply. There, a scent like burnt copper and ash, with an undertone of something reptilian. It came through the window, he said. But it wasn't human. A demon, Livia asked. No. Something else, something that belongs to the mountain. He turned to Flavius. This priest, Cassius, where is he? At the temple of Vulcan, on the lower slopes of Vesuvius. But surely you don't suspect. We suspect everyone. Livia cut him off. Have your guards seal the city. No one leaves without our permission. As Flavius scurried away, Marcus and Livia prepared for what they both knew was coming. A confrontation with whatever was using the mountain's power. The Temple of Vulcan was ancient, predating the Roman colonization of Pompeii. As they approached, Marcus felt the hair on his arms rise. The air was thick with power, electric and dangerous. Remember the plan, Livia whispered. We observe first. Then, a scream cut through the air, high, terrified and definitely female. Without hesitation, they ran toward the temple. The main doors were sealed, but Marcus could smell fresh fear, coming from around the side. They found a hidden entrance, steps leading down into the mountain itself. The tunnel was lit by an eerie red glow that seemed to come from the rocks themselves. As they descended, the temperature rose, and Marcus could hear chanting, not in the ancient tongue of the cult of shadows, but in something even older. They emerged into a vast, natural cavern. Lava bubbled in pools around the edges, providing hellish light. In the center, on a platform of volcanic rock, stood Cassius. But he was not alone. The missing girls were there, all 5 of them, standing in a circle around a fissure in the ground. Their eyes were blank, their mouths moving in unison as they chanted, and from the fissure, something was emerging. It was not the entity they'd faced in Rome. This was something of the earth itself, a spirit of fire and stone that had slumbered beneath Vesuvius for millennia, and Cassius was waking it. Welcome, investigators, Cassius said, without turning around. His voice was like grinding stone. You're just in time to witness the birth of a god. Those girls are innocent, Livia said, stepping forward. Release them. Cassius laughed. Innocent, they came willingly, called by dreams I sent them. They want to be part of something greater, to become vessels for the mountain's power. Like you did? Marcus asked, noting the way Cassius's skin seemed to crack and glow within a fire. I was the first, but I'm burning out, you see. Human flesh can't contain this power for long. But 5 vessels sharing the burden, they might last long enough to bring the mountain's wrath to Rome itself. Marcus and Livia exchanged glances. They'd prepared for a cult, not for someone trying to weaponize Vesuvius itself. The thing in the fissure pulled itself further out, a hand of molten rock, then an arm. If it fully emerged, if it possessed those girls, the binding ritual, Livia said urgently, the one we used in Rome, won't work, Marcus said. This isn't a demon, it's an elemental part of the earth itself. My grandmother's magic has no power over it. Then what do we do? Marcus thought furiously. Then, like a whisper from the past, he heard his grandmother's voice. Sometimes, child, the only way to fight fire is with water. The aqueduct, he said suddenly. Pompey's aqueduct runs near here, bringing water from the mountains. If we can breach it, flood the cavern. It might cool the lava enough to trap the elemental, Livia finished. But the girls will die if we don't try something. Cassius had heard them. He turned, and they saw that his transformation was nearly complete. His skin was cracked, like dried earth, glowing from within. You think your petty schemes can stop the mountain's awakening? I am become Vulcan himself, he gestured, and a wave of superheated air slammed into them. Marcus grabbed Livia, pulling her behind a rock formation as their clothes began to smoke. I'll distract him, Marcus said. You get to those girls, break the circle. Without them, as anchors, the elemental can't fully manifest. That's suicide, Livia protested. No, Marcus said, pulling out a vial from his pack. The remainder of the nightshade poison. It's strategy. Trust me, Gefährte. Before she could stop him, he drank the poison and stepped out from behind the rock. Cassius, he roared, you're nothing but a man who let fear of death drive him to madness. Just like Aurelius. The comparison to the failed senator enraged Cassius. He lunged at Marcus, moving with inhuman speed. But Marcus was ready. As his body began to slow from the poison, his spirit began to separate, entering that space between life and death. In the shadow realm, he could see the truth. The elemental wasn't evil, it was simply ancient, confused, drawn by Cassius's call, but not truly wanting to be here. And the girls' spirits were fighting, trying to break free from the enchantment. Marcus's spirit form reached out to them, speaking not in words but in pure intention. Fight. Remember who you are. Fight. In the physical realm, his body collapsed, just as Cassius reached him. The priest grabbed Marcus by the throat, lifting him easily. Weak Germanic fool, Cassius snarled. But that was when Livia struck. While Cassius was distracted, she'd circled around to the girls. Using her silver blade, she cut the symbols drawn on their foreheads. One by one, they collapsed. The chanting stopped. The elemental, half emerged, roared in confusion. Without the circle to anchor it, it began to sink back into the fissure. No, Cassius dropped Marcus and turned toward the elemental. I command you. I am your master. The elemental paused, its molten eyes focusing on Cassius. Then, with what might have been amusement, it reached out and grabbed him. Cassius screamed as he was pulled into the fissure, his body of flesh and fire merging with the elemental as it descended back into the depths. The last thing they heard was his voice, no longer human, crying out in a language older than words. The cavern began to shake. Without Cassius's will holding it stable, the volcanic forces were returning to their natural chaotic state. Marcus, Livia ran to where he lay, checking for a pulse. It was there, faint but steady. She pulled out the antidote they always carried and forced it between his lips. His eyes fluttered open just as the first rocks began to fall from the ceiling. The girls, he gasped. I've got them. Together they helped the confused, terrified girls to their feet. The youngest couldn't have been more than 15, and she clung to Livia like a lifeline. They ran for the tunnel as the cavern collapsed behind them. The ground shook, and Marcus could hear the mountain's rage at being disturbed. They emerged into daylight just as the temple of Vulcan crumbled, sealing the entrance forever. Or so they hoped. Marcus stood on the balcony of their house in Rome, watching the sun set over the city. 5 years had passed since Pompeii, 5 years of fighting the darkness that crept at the edges of civilization. They'd faced 13 major threats in that time, from possessed senators to ancient curses awakened by tomb robbers. Each victory had cost them something: scars, friends, pieces of their innocence, but they'd endured, together. "You're brooding again," Livia said, joining him on the balcony. She carried 2 cups of wine, the good Falernian they saved for special occasions. "Remembering," Marcus corrected, accepting the cup. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if your father hadn't requested me for that exhibition? You'd still be a gladiator, probably dead by now. I'd be a vessel for an ancient evil. Rome would have fallen to darkness." She sipped her wine. "So no, I try not to wonder." Marcus smiled. 5 years had changed them both. Livia had grown from a frightened girl into a formidable investigator, her knowledge of the occult surpassed only by her courage. And Marcus had found the home he'd thought lost forever. "Corvus came by today," Livia said. "There are reports from Britannia, stone circles activating, druids speaking of ancient prophecies. When do we leave?" "Tomorrow." She paused. "He also brought other news. The Emperor has approved our request." Marcus turned to her, hope rising in his chest. "The school, the Academy of Supernatural Investigation. We can begin recruiting candidates next month. No more fighting alone." It had been their dream for the past year, to train others, to create a network of investigators across the empire. The darkness was vast, but so was Rome's reach. "Your father would be proud," Marcus said softly. Livia's eyes glistened. "I hope so. I choose to believe the man who wrote that journal would be proud." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city lights begin to twinkle. Then Livia asked the question she'd been holding back for months. "Marcus, what are we? To each other, I mean. We're partners, friends, Gefährte and Socius. But is that all?" Marcus set down his wine cup and turned to face her fully. "What do you want us to be? I asked you first." He laughed, a sound that had become more common over the years. "You Romans and your need for definitions." Then, more seriously, "I've loved you since you stood on that altar and spoke the words I taught you, defying a demon with nothing but courage and trust. But I'm still a freed slave, a barbarian in the eyes of most Romans. You could have anyone." Livia silenced him with a kiss. It was their first, after 5 years of dancing around the truth. "I could have anyone," she agreed when they parted. "I choose you. I chose you 5 years ago when I asked for your help. I choose you every day we face the darkness together. And I'll keep choosing you if you'll have me." Marcus's answer was to kiss her again, pouring 5 years of unspoken feelings into the contact. When they finally separated, both were breathless. "The academy will need teachers," he said. "A married couple would provide good examples of partnership. Is that a proposal?" "It's Germanic tradition for the man to offer a weapon as a marriage gift," Marcus said, pulling out a dagger he'd been carrying for weeks. "This is iron from my homeland, forged with silver from the Temple of Vesta. It will cut through any darkness, protect against any evil." Livia took the dagger, testing its balance. "It's perfect, but I should warn you, Roman weddings involve a lot of ceremonies. I survived the arena. I can survive your ceremonies." They laughed, and the sound echoed across the city. Below them, Rome continued its eternal bustle, unaware of the dangers these two faced on its behalf. A cry pierced the night, not of fear but of celebration. In the street below, a wedding procession passed, torches blazing, musicians playing. The bride and groom looked young, innocent, untouched by the darkness. Marcus and Livia knew existed. "We protect that," Livia said softly. "That joy, that innocence. That's why we do this." "No," Marcus corrected, taking her hand. "That's why we started. We continue because we found something worth fighting for in each other." As the wedding procession disappeared around a corner, Marcus felt a familiar tingle in his nose, not fear this time, but something else. Hope, joy, love. He'd learned over the years that his ability could detect more than just terror. All strong emotions left their mark. "What do you smell?" Livia asked, recognizing his expression. "Happiness," he said. "From you. It smells like spring flowers and fresh rain." "I am happy," she said. "For the first time since my mother died, I'm truly happy. Despite everything we've faced, everything we'll face, I'm happy, because I am happy, she said. For the first time since my mother died, I'm truly happy. Despite everything we've faced, everything we'll face, I'm happy, because I'm not alone. Marcus pulled her close, and they stood together watching the stars appear over Rome. But their peace was interrupted by rapid footsteps on the stairs. Claudia appeared, her face grave despite the joy she'd shown moments ago at their engagement news. "Forgive the interruption," she said, "but there's someone here you need to see." They followed her down to the receiving room, where a figure waited, cloaked and hooded. When the person pulled back their hood, Marcus's hand went to his sword. It was one of the girls they'd saved from Pompeii 5 years ago, Octavia, the youngest. But she was changed. Her eyes held knowledge too heavy for her 20 years, and her hands bore scars that looked like ritual marks. "Octavia," Livia breathed, "we thought you'd returned to your family in Sicily." "I did," the young woman said, "for a time, but what happened in that cavern changed me. I dream things that come true. I see the shadows moving when others see nothing. And lately," she paused, gathering courage, "lately, I've been dreaming of Vesuvius. It's going to erupt. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. Within the year." Marcus and Livia exchanged glances. They'd always wondered if sealing the cavern had been enough. "It's not just the natural eruption," Octavia continued. "When Cassius merged with the elemental, he didn't die. He became part of the mountain itself, and he's been growing stronger, feeding on the volcanic energy. When Vesuvius erupts, he'll be reborn in the fire and ash. And this time, there won't be just one of him. He'll possess everyone killed by the eruption, creating an army of fire-touched dead." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Pompeii had a population of thousands. If Vesuvius erupted and Cassius used those deaths, "We need to evacuate the city," Livia said immediately. "They won't listen," Octavia said sadly. "I've tried warning them. They think I'm mad. The mountain has been quiet for so long, they don't believe it could wake." "Then we need another solution," Marcus said. "Something to stop Cassius before the eruption, or contain him during it." "There might be a way," Octavia said, reaching into her pack. She pulled out a scroll, ancient and brittle. "I've spent 5 years researching. This is a ritual of binding, created by the original priests of Vulcan, back when they understood that the mountain god needed to be appeased, not controlled." Livia took the scroll, examining it carefully. "This would require someone to enter the mountain's heart during the eruption. It's a death sentence." "Yes," Octavia said simply, "but one death to save thousands seems a fair trade." "No," Marcus said firmly. "We don't trade lives, we find another way." "There is no other way." Octavia's composure cracked. "Do you think I came here lightly? I've exhausted every option. The only way to stop Cassius is for someone to carry the binding ritual into the mountain's heart when it erupts. The person would need to be sensitive to spiritual energies, strong enough to resist possession, and willing to sacrifice everything." She looked at them meaningfully. "You saved me once. Now I'm trying to save everyone else." "You're not doing it alone," Livia said. "Neither of you can." Octavia said, "You're needed here. The Academy, your work, Rome, needs you both alive. But me, I'm just a girl who has nightmares that come true. My death would mean something." Marcus stood abruptly. "We have time. You said within the year. That gives us months to find another solution." "The dreams are getting more frequent, more urgent," Octavia warned. "I don't think we have as long as you hope." As if in response to her words, the ground trembled slightly. It was barely noticeable, just a slight vibration, but all three of them felt it. "It's beginning," Octavia whispered. Over the next 3 months, they worked tirelessly. Livia researched every text in the imperial libraries, seeking alternatives to the sacrifice. Marcus traveled to Germania, consulting with the remaining wise women of his tribe, learning songs of binding that might work against an element. Octavia divided her time between them, her dreams growing more violent each night. They also began quietly evacuating Pompeii, using their authority to relocate as many people as possible, under various pretexts. But it was slow work. People didn't want to leave their homes based on what they saw as superstition. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Titus, now an old man but still sharp, remembered something from his military days. "There was a battle," he said, visiting them one evening. "Before I came to the senator's service, we were fighting Germanic tribes. No offense, Marcus. And they had a shaman who could split his soul. He'd put pieces of himself into objects, and even if his body died, he'd persist through them. Soul anchors," Marcus breathed. "My grandmother mentioned them, but said the practice was forbidden because it damaged the soul. But if we're already talking about someone entering the mountain," Livia said, understanding dawning, "they could split their soul first. Part stays in the mountain to complete the binding, part remains outside to survive. It's never been done with a binding ritual," Octavia said, but there was hope in her voice. The person would be forever changed, neither fully living nor dead, but alive enough, Marcus said, alive enough to continue. They spent another month preparing. The ritual to split a soul was complex, requiring precise timing and rare components, but finally they were ready. The night before they planned to travel to Pompeii, Marcus found Livia in their garden, standing beneath the olive tree they'd planted after their first successful case together. "You're going to go and volunteer, aren't you?" she said, without turning around. "To be the one who enters the mountain." "My grandmother's blood gives me the best chance of surviving the soul split," he said. "And if you don't survive, if something goes wrong," Marcus walked to her, taking her hands, "then you continue. You run the academy. You train the next generation. You keep Rome safe. I don't want to do it without you. You won't have to. Even if my body dies, part of my soul will remain. And the blood oath we share, in the memories we've created, in the work we've built together." He touched her face gently. "Death isn't the end, Livia. Not for people like us, who've walked in worlds." She kissed him fiercely. "Then we do it together. We split both our souls. We both enter the mountain if needed. Together or not at all. Livia, no arguments. You said I'm your Gefährte. In Germanic culture, doesn't that mean we share everything, including this?" Marcus knew better than to argue when she used his own culture against him. "Together then." The earthquake that hit that night made the decision for them. It was strong enough to crack walls in Rome, and they knew Pompeii must be suffering worse. They left immediately, riding through the night with Octavia and a small team of trusted allies. They arrived to find the city in panic. The mountain was smoking, and the ground shook constantly. The evacuation they'd started had accelerated, but thousands still remained, paralyzed by fear or disbelief. "We're out of time," Octavia said, her eyes reflecting visions only she could see. "It will happen tomorrow at dawn." They made their preparations at the Temple of Vulcan, or what remained of it. The soul-splitting ritual required precision, and they had only one chance. "Are you sure about this?" Octavia asked, as she prepared the ritual circle. "We're sure," Livia and Marcus said in unison. The ritual was agony. Marcus felt his very essence tearing, part of him remaining in his body, while another part was bound into a specially prepared amulet. Beside him, Livia endured the same torment, her soul anchored in a ring that had been her mother's. When it was over, they both felt different, lighter, as if they might float away, but also more aware of the spiritual realm that existed alongside the physical. "It worked," Octavia said, exhausted from conducting the ritual. "Now we wait for dawn." They didn't have to wait long. As the first light touched the mountain's peak, Vesuvius exploded. The sound was beyond description, like the earth itself screaming. A column of fire and ash shot into the sky, and the ground bucked like a living thing. "Now," Marcus shouted over the noise. They ran toward the mountain, against the tide of terrified citizens fleeing the other way. The heat was incredible, and ash began to fall like snow. At the fissure they'd found, a crack in the mountain's side that led to its heart, they paused. "Remember," Octavia said, holding the scroll with the binding ritual, "once you begin, you can't stop. The ritual must be completed." no matter what Cassius throws at you. We know, Livia said. She looked at Marcus. Ready, partner? Always. They entered the fissure as the mountain convulsed around them. The path led down, always down, toward the heart of the volcanic fury. The heat should have killed them instantly, but the soul split had changed them, made them partly spiritual beings who could endure what normal humans couldn't. They found Cassius in a chamber of pure fire, no longer recognizable as human. He was the mountain's rage, given form, a being of lava and hatred. You, he roared, his voice the sound of grinding stone. You cannot stop me. I am Vesuvius. I am destruction incarnate. You're a fool who lost himself to power, Marcus replied, beginning the binding chant. Cassius attacked, waves of fire crashing against them. But Livia raised her hands, and the part of her soul that remained outside, safe in her mother's ring, anchored her against the assault. She continued the ritual as Marcus fought, using his enhanced spiritual awareness to dodge attacks that would have vaporized a normal person. You think your little spell can bind me? Cassius laughed. I am eternal, I am. You are bound. Livia and Marcus shouted together, completing the ritual. The effect was immediate. Chains of pure spiritual energy erupted from the mountain's walls, wrapping around Cassius. He screamed, struggling, but the bindings held. This won't hold forever, he snarled. The mountain will erupt again, and when it does, you'll still be bound, Marcus said. The ritual doesn't just trap you, it transforms you. You wanted to be the mountain, now you are. But mountains don't think, don't feel, don't hate. You'll become just another force of nature, powerful but mindless. They could see it happening already. The intelligence in Cassius's eyes was fading, replaced by the simple primal force of volcanic activity. No, he whispered, then roared. No, but it was too late. The binding was complete. Cassius collapsed into himself, becoming nothing more than lava and stone, his consciousness scattered to the winds. The chamber began to collapse. Marcus grabbed Livia's hand. We need to go. They ran, following the path back up as the mountain collapsed behind them. They emerged just as the pyroclastic flow, a wave of superheated gas and ash, raced down the mountainside. There was no time to run. Marcus pulled Livia close, and they faced their death together. But death didn't come. The soul split had worked better than they'd hoped. As their physical bodies were consumed by the volcanic fury, their consciousness persisted, held in place by the anchors they'd created. They watched, incorporeal, as Pompeii was buried beneath ash and pumice. Then, slowly, they began to rebuild. Their souls, anchored in the physical world, drew matter to themselves. It took hours, but eventually they stood again, physical but changed. We're alive, Livia said wonderingly, looking at her hands. They looked normal, but she could feel the difference. She was more than human now, touched by death, and returned. Different, Marcus said, but alive. They found Octavia at the evacuation camp outside the disaster zone. She took one look at them, and knew. You died, she said. It wasn't a question. Temporarily, Livia said, and Cassius, bound. The mountain may erupt again someday, but it will just be a mountain. The evil is gone. Octavia wept then. Tears of relief and exhaustion. It's over. This threat is, Marcus said, but there will be others. Final epilogue. 20 years hence, the Academy of Supernatural Investigation stood proudly on the Palatine Hill, its white marble columns gleaming in the afternoon sun. Marcus walked through the training grounds, observing the newest class of recruits, practicing their combat techniques. Keep your guard up, Quintus, he called to a young man struggling with sword work. The dead don't tire, but you do. Yes, Master Marcus. He smiled at the title. 20 years ago, he'd been a slave. Now he was a teacher, respected throughout the empire for his knowledge of the supernatural. You're scaring them again, Livia said, approaching with a scroll in hand. Her hair had grey streaks now. premature aging from their death and rebirth at Vesuvius, but her eyes were still sharp and warm. They need to be scared. Fear keeps them alive. He looked at the scroll. New assignment from the emperor himself. Strange occurrences in Egypt. Mummies walking, plagues of locusts. The usual apocalyptic signs. Who are we sending? I thought Octavia's team. She's ready to lead. Marcus nodded. Octavia had become their finest investigator, her prophetic dreams invaluable in preventing disasters before they occurred. They walked together toward their private quarters, passing the Wall of Memory, a monument to those who died fighting the darkness. Titus's name was there, along with Claudia's and too many others. Do you ever regret it? Livia asked suddenly. The life we chose, we could have been normal, had children, grown old naturally. Marcus considered. They discovered after Vesuvius that their transformation had made them sterile, the price of cheating death. They aged slowly, if at all, and would likely live far longer than normal humans. We have children, he said, gesturing to the academy. Every student we train, every life we save, that's our legacy. Spoken like a true philosopher. You've been reading too much Seneca. You're the one who insisted I get a proper Roman education. They reached their quarters, a simple but comfortable space overlooking the city. On the wall hung two items, the amulet and ring that held pieces of their souls, keeping them anchored to the world. Marcus, Livia said, turning serious, I've been thinking about what happens when we're no longer needed. When the academy is established enough, when there are enough trained investigators. You want to rest, he said, understanding. Don't you? We've fought for 25 years, first alone, then building this. Maybe it's time to let others carry the torch. Marcus pulled her close. Where would we go? Anywhere. Germania to see your homeland, Egypt to see the pyramids, Britannia to explore those stone circles. We could be explorers instead of warriors. And if we find darkness in those places, then we report it to the academy and let the young ones handle it, she said firmly. We've earned our rest, Marcus. He was about to respond when a knock came at the door. A young recruit entered, breathless. Masters, forgive the interruption, but there's a visit. She says she's from the future and needs to warn us about something. Marcus and Livia exchanged amused glances. Time travelers were rare but not unheard of. Send her in, Livia said. The woman who entered looked remarkably like Livia, but younger, with Marcus's distinctive Germanic features mixed with Roman refinement. Hello, she said nervously. I know this will sound impossible, but I'm Julia, your descendant from 300 years in the future. We can't have descendants, Marcus said carefully. We're sterile. Julia smiled. Not biological descendants, but the academy you undoed. It becomes the foundation of something greater, a worldwide network of protectors, keeping humanity safe from supernatural threats. Every member considers themselves your spiritual descendants. You're remembered as the mother and father of the Light Guards. Light Guards? Livia asked. That's what we become. Not just investigators, but active protectors, bringing light to dark places. Julia pulled out a medallion showing two figures standing back to back, swords raised. Clearly Marcus and Livia. This is our symbol. Every guard carries one. Why are you here? Marcus asked, though he was deeply moved by the revelation. To warn you, in 3 months, someone will try to destroy the academy, a senator named Varus, who secretly leads a new cult. They plan to attack during the graduation ceremony. But now that you know, we can stop it, Livia finished. Thank you. Julia smiled. No, thank you for everything you've done and will do. Your story, the gladiator and the senator's daughter who faced the darkness together, it inspires us still. She began to fade, the time travel spell pulling her back. Wait, Livia called. Are we remembered as happy? Julia's last words echoed as she disappeared. You're remembered as the greatest love story Rome ever produced. After she left, Marcus and Livia stood in silence for a moment. So much for retirement, Marcus said wryly. We can retire after we stop Varus, Livia said. One more fight. You've been saying that for 20 years, and you've been believing me for 20 years. They laughed, and Marcus realized that Julia had been right about one thing. They were happy. Despite all the darkness they'd faced, all the losses they'd endured, they'd found joy in each other and in their purpose. I love you, he said suddenly. I should say it more often. You say it every day, Livia replied. In how you stand beside me, how you trust me, how you've never once complained about the life we chose together. As the sun set over Rome, they stood together, watching the eternal city prepare for night. Somewhere out there, darkness was stirring, planning, threatening the innocent, but also out there were their students, their legacy, ready to face whatever came. One more fight, Marcus said, then we travel the world. Together, Livia asked, though she knew the answer. Always together, my Gefährte, my Socius, my heart. They kissed as the last light faded, two souls bound by choice, by blood, by love that had survived death itself. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new darkness to face. But tonight, they were simply Marcus and Livia, the gladiator and the senator's daughter, who had saved Rome and found each other. In the academy below, students practiced and studied, unaware that their founders stood above them, keeping watch as they always had, as they always would. The darkness was vast and ancient, but love and courage were older still, and as long as people were willing to stand against the night, the light would endure. The story of Marcus and Livia would be told for generations, growing in the telling, becoming legend. But at its heart would always be the truth, that two people, broken by circumstance, had chosen to heal each other, and in doing so, had healed the world around them. As the stars appeared over Rome, a wolf howled, somewhere in the distance, not a threat, but a promise. The guardians were watching, the innocent would be protected, and love, the greatest magic of all, would always triumph over darkness. Can you smell it? Livia asked, knowing Marcus's abilities had evolved over the years. Marcus inhaled deeply, sorting through the thousands of scents that made up Rome at night. Hope, he said finally, it smells like spring rain and new grass. It's everywhere. Then we've won, Livia said, not just against the cults or the demons, but against despair itself. The war's not over, Marcus reminded her. No, but we're winning, and that's enough for tonight. They went inside to plan for tomorrow's challenges, to prepare the next generation, to continue the work that had defined their lives. But more than that, they went inside to simply be together, two souls who had found each other across impossible odds and refused to let go. Outside, Rome slept peacefully, protected by the academy, watched over by the light guards of the future, and blessed by the love of a gladiator and a senator's daughter who had chosen each other over everything else. The end was not an end, but a beginning, and somewhere in the shadow realm, Marcus's spirit wolves howled their approval, knowing that their charge had found his true home at last. Not in a place, but in a person, not in Germania or Rome, but in the heart of the woman who stood beside him. Love had conquered fear, light had banished darkness. And the story, their story, would echo through eternity, inspiring others to stand, to fight, and most importantly, to choose love over power, always.